At the heart of the world's busiest city in Tokyo, Japan, the streets are bustling as millions of people make their way to work, school, or leisure. On Takeshita Street in Harajuku, people stroll along as tourists from all over the world explore the food, the attractions, and the scenery. In one pastry shop, the cakes, with fruits and berries on top, tempt both the eyes and the stomach. The city feels vibrant. The air is rich with the sounds of traffic, music, and also construction projects, catering to the influx of foreign visitors who come to the country for its unique culture, delicious food, and the cleanliness of the city. Judging from the scenery alone, this does not look like a country that has experienced 30 years of deflation and economic stagnation. And it's hardly the picture of a country that economists talk as if it's slowly falling apart. Because behind all of the crowded streets, futuristic buildings, and millions of incoming tourists, there are some real problems that Japan's economy has to face. And these are problems so big that even the brightest minds in the Japanese government couldn't solve after decades of trying. So, what are the economic problems of Japan, and how do all these problems stem from the things that make Japan so successful in the first place? What are the consequences of not having economic growth, and does this all really matter? After all, if the people are happy, well-fed, and have no complaints whatsoever, why should we listen to people and economists alike who perpetuates the idea that Japan is falling apart? Alright, so I'm going to ask one important question for you. Why is Japan's economic growth so low despite its advanced technology, highly skilled and educated workforce, complete infrastructure, and a functioning government with very low corruption? Well, one very obvious elephant in the room is its irreversible demographic decline. Japan's population declined by 0.4% in 2022, or a drop of 556,000 people, the 12th consecutive year that the population has decreased. If this trend continues indefinitely, Japan's population is expected to fall below 100 million by 2053, and below 50 million by the end of the century according to UN projections. The country's population today is at 124 million, so Japan's population will essentially be cut in half. This in itself already sounds pretty bleak, but the problem does not end here, because there's also the problem of an aging population. Japan is the single oldest country in the world with a median age of 48.4, far above the world average of 30.9. 28% of the population is age 65 or above, compared to the world's average of 9.1%. And Japan also has the lowest proportion of young people aged 14 years and below at 12%, far below the world's average of 25%. Keep in mind that 40 years ago, this population composition is actually what makes Japan become so rich and successful in the first place, as Japan experienced a demographic dividend where most of its population was in their prime working years. Fast forward to today, that dividend actually feels like a loan that has to be repaid as people got older and retire at the same time. Now, when a country is facing a demographic decline at this scale, the outcome will likely to be truly catastrophic. For example, a trend that we can clearly see in Japan besides demographic decline is young people moving to bigger cities to find better work opportunities. In fact, out of the 47 prefectures of Japan, Tokyo is the only one where the population increased last year, with all the remaining 46 prefectures experiencing a population decline. Some rural villages even have recorded 0 newborns for years, creating towns made mostly out of elderly residents. So, what happens is that the average age of the population in the place these young people leave behind automatically goes up. A community with a higher proportion of older people may be less attractive to businesses, and there will be less labor to work with since most of the people will be retirees. Just imagine the knock-on effects of this. Fewer children being born meant there will be fewer schools. Housing prices will drastically drop because more homes are unoccupied, which can be good or bad depending on how you look at it. This will cause fewer new homes to be built and probably the decline of property development companies. There will be less turnover for shopkeepers and restaurants, so many of them will close. There will be fewer people going to malls, pubs, or cinemas, so some of them will eventually get bankrupt. And there will be fewer people traveling by public transport, which will then become costlier to run. All of these are already evident in Japan and will only become an even bigger problem in the future. Now, a decline in population growth will reduce both labor and consumption as we've examined before. But one thing that is just as important is that an aging population will increase the dependency ratio, aka the ratio of non-working to working population. This will not only lower the potential output and the productivity of the economy, but also burden the young people as they have to compensate for the increased demand for healthcare, pensions, and social services, likely in the form of increased public debt or increased taxes. In fact, if Japan were to keep its dependency ratio at constant while its population keeps declining at current rates, it will have to push back people's retirement age to at least 78 years old. So, I guess one solution to all these problems is just to ban the concept of retirement altogether and have people work as long as they possibly can. But, all jokes aside, this problem is likely to be irreversible. As much as the government wants their adult population to have more children and may even force, or at least nudge them through policies, seeing things this way can be dehumanizing, and it blurs your judgment of what fertility really means. The extremely complex decision of adults on the choice of whether to have children or not. This choice is beyond the reach of any government, because perceptions of parenthood, family, and tradition are mostly formed based on one's own family and culture. And historically, policies that try to excessively control this decision of how many kids to have always ended badly both for the government and its own people. But despite the irreversible nature of demographic decline, there's also an argument for why Japan's demographic problem is not as bad as it looks. For starters, Japan is one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world with advanced R&D on automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. So, as Japan's population continues to decrease, one could argue that most of the loss in economic output can be replaced by AIs, if AI will be advanced enough to replace human output, which is likely to be the case. Second, despite the consensus that Japan has fallen behind on the global stage, especially with the rise of China, Japan is still the third largest economy in the world and also an underappreciated destination for foreign investment and businesses, especially outside of Tokyo. The city of Osaka, for example, has a GDP comparable to Singapore, and most of Japanese prefectures rank highly in GDP per capita figures. There is still a lot of room for growth in its automobile, biotechnology, electronics, and even its tourism sector, all of which carry high margins. Now, as I said before, Japan's economic paradox lies in the difference between its economic situation and the scenes you see in the street of Japan. Even in the 1990s, when Japan was going through a lost decade, facing the burst of a real estate bubble, a stock market crash, and a debt crisis, you wouldn't be able to tell from the neon lights of Shinjuku with blends of shopping malls, restaurants, bars, and nightclubs, all of them packed with people at night. And this is because the effects of low growth in Japan are not visible at first glance, especially in a city like Tokyo, a vibrant and dynamic city that attracts people and businesses from all over the world. First of all, Japan is the second most indebted country in the world with a debt to GDP ratio of 266%, as it spends more on stimulus and social security to support the aging population. If you look at the list of countries with the highest debt to GDP ratio in the world, it does seem a bit worrying that Japan is in the company of nations like Venezuela, Sudan, Greece, and even the USA that had massive criticisms regarding its humongous amounts of debt. And while a high debt to GDP ratio does not necessarily mean that the country is in a bad economic situation, it is a worrying statistic. Also, young people in Japan face an increasing prospect of limited work opportunities, stagnant wages, and an increasing burden on supporting its older population. Since the lost decade of the 1990s, Japan's annual wage growth has hardly budged, despite its shrinking labor market, which theoretically should give workers more bargaining power as it increases the scarcity and value of labor. And this phenomenon of stubbornly static wages has been one of the greatest mysteries of Japan that economists couldn't solve. Part of this is because of the deflationary mindset of the Japanese people, aka the tendency of consumers and businesses to expect lower prices and wages in the future. You see, one big problem that Japan has run into is that both consumers and businesses just won't spend. A lot of them had money, sure, but because deflation rewards saving, not spending, most Japanese people didn't want to spend money, literally. Even when the Japanese central bank just gives money to businesses for free in the form of tax cuts, for example, those businesses will hoard the money or just give it to their shareholders in the form of dividends rather than investing it. And then the shareholders will also hoard the money as well. This is really bad because an economy can only function properly if people spend their money. Consumerism, while controversial, is actually beneficial for the economy, which is also why most central banks often target 2% inflation, not 0% inflation, in order to motivate people to spend. So, unlike most countries in the world, in Japan, there is just no such mindset that you can actually invest money to make more money in the future. That concept of growth is foreign to them. Everyone expects their business profits and wages to be stagnant every single year, and they acted accordingly, creating a vicious cycle of low growth, low inflation, low wages, and low spending. This is why despite the borderline extreme efforts of the government and the central bank to stimulate the economy through unconventional fiscal and monetary policies, they had no impact whatsoever. Okay, so on to the big question. Does this all matter? Well, it does matter, especially when you're a young people living in Japan. You see, a survey conducted in February last year by the Nippon Foundation asked young people aged 17 to 19 from 6 countries: Japan, the USA, UK, China, South Korea, and India, asking the respondents if they thought their country would improve in the future. And the results are quite worrying to say the very least. When asked about their country's overall future, only 13.9% of Japan's youth thought that their country will improve, and 35.1% thought that their country will get worse. That last in the entire survey. Compare this to China, where 95.7% thought that they will improve, while only 1.2% thought they will get worse. And the results of this survey gets even worse when the respondents were asked about their country's economic competitiveness. In Japan, only 1.4% of the respondents thought that the economy will be much stronger in the future, due to its aging population and stagnant growth, especially wages, which will be important for these young people looking for work. Again, they placed that last in the survey. Now, when asked about the future of science and technology, Japan surprisingly still ranked last out of the 6 countries. But when we dive deeper into the data, 45.5% of Japanese youth actually thought that Japan's science and technology will be stronger in the future. So, not bad at all. And when asked about their country's culture and arts competitiveness, Japan again ranked last in the survey, reflecting a sense that manga, anime, and J-pop, regarded as Japan's strategic exports, are being swept aside by the emergence of the Hallyu wave of K-pop and K-drama. Or maybe, the 6,000 17 to 19 years old young people who took this survey are just very pessimistic human beings. I don't know. But an older research conducted by Pew Research in 2018 also came to the same conclusion. While most Japanese felt better about their economy today compared to the dark lost decades of the 1990s and the 2000s, this confidence in the economy does not translate into hope for a better future. For example, only 15% of Japanese think that today's children will be better off financially than their parents, and quote from the research, majorities are still dissatisfied with the Japanese economy, pessimistic about their children's future, and critical of their democracy. So, all of this does show that people, both young and old in Japan, are quite worried about the country's economic prospects. It also indicates that things like stagnant wages, grim job opportunities, and higher cost of living for those who live in Tokyo may cause the younger population to feel that they don't have enough confidence to begin starting families, which will only worsen Japan's demographic problem. Now, if you want to know how Japan's economy rose to power to become one of the dominant economic powers in the world, and how it fell into 30 years of economic stagnation, feel free to check out this video. This is Doverhill, and see you next time.